In this lesson, we're going to take a quick look at the velocity settings inside of our container. Now, we're going to continue working with the file that we just created and add to what we've made. And we're going to try to create like a cigarette smoke type of effect. All right, continuing on, let's go ahead and hit play, and we'll play this out. Okay, so I'm going to reduce the scale just a little bit so it's not as strong. And we're going to have just a little bit of dissipation. Okay, so we're just adding on to what we made earlier. There we go. Maybe a little bit more dissipation. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is close up my density and open up the velocity settings. Now this is really cool because the velocity itself will allow you to multiply what's happening in here. So for example, if I take my y and I reduce it to 0.5, see how much slower that reacted? Let's do 0.25. There we go. And we got a nice clean stream. Let's go back up to the boundary on the y, and we're going to say none. So let's just let it die out there. There we go. So let's say on the x, I want to increase that. No problem. So essentially, this is just a multiplier that's allowing us to modify the scale in any of these particular directions. Now, Z not very useful in a 2D, but in a 3D very useful. Okay. Now let's talk about swirl. Swirl is essentially a built-in attribute that is happening in the entire container, and it's swirling around and moving constantly. So if I set this all the way up, I'm going to have a very tight pattern. If I set this down low, it's going to be a very wide pattern. So you can kind of see how that is moving about. Okay, very, very cool. You know, like I said, you can have a tremendous amount of fun with this. Now, we talked about velocity, okay, and I'm going to leave my velocity scale just how it is. Let's open up Turbulence, okay. Now, Turbulence is a built-in noise system. Unlike swirl, swirl is essentially going to take the fluids and swirl them and move them. Turbulence is actually a noise pattern. So if I increase this noise pattern, okay, again, the higher the number, the tighter the noise. And you can see here what it's trying to do. It's really, really tight. Okay, but I'm going to reduce this down to where there's just a little bit of noise. And I'm going to decrease my frequency as well. Now, the higher the frequency, the tighter the pattern. So, something just to keep in mind, right? If you want a larger pattern, let this be a smaller number. Okay, the speed is controlled with this attribute. So if I want it to be really slow noise, there we go. Or if I want it to be a really windy day and there's just a lot of crazy noise happening, I can crank this up and you can really see it happening there. So again, you can have a lot, you can have very little. I think just going in there and adding a little bit really starts to take over the effect and give you something that really looks pretty cool.